everyone. Angie McGilvery from Apex Physical Therapy. Welcome to Coffee with Angie. And today is going to be super exciting. I have two very important people here with me. First of all, I have Joe McGilvery, my better half, my partner in crime for the last 15 years. And who is also ECS, which means he is board certified in electrophysiology. And that is going to come into play today as we talk about our case review with EMG and nerve conduction study. And then I also have joining us today a dear friend, mentor, colleague of mine, Garrett Salpeter. And Garrett's joining us from Austin, Texas. Right, Garrett?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you both, and I'm really honored and excited to be here.
Awesome. You're welcome. Our pleasure. I'm going to introduce Garrett here to as well. So I've known Garrett now for probably a little over 2 years, I think it's been. But Garrett is the CEO and founder, and some will also call him the chief neurological officer at his company, Neufit. And that is Neufit, which basically is abbreviated for neurological fitness. Yes, there we go. And I was introduced to Garrett, like I said, about 2 years or so ago. And his passion is really in applying his background in physics and engineering to improve the performance of the human body. And not just from a performance standpoint, but also from injury and recovery standpoint. And his belief system is that we need to take a neurological approach in making these processes happen, as opposed to just taking a muscular approach, which is kind of a little bit more of what we see in some of the traditional physical therapy world. So Garrett's technology is the Newbie, which is a form of direct current electrical stimulation. And so before we kind of dive much deeper into how we have blended utilizing the elite EMG nerve conduction study technology we have in our practice and the elite Neufit technology, I would like Garrett to take a few minutes, if you would, and talk about the Newbie and all of the amazingness that it is.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for the intro. So I do believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from injuries, recover from surgery, to achieve their best levels of health and performance is to work with the nervous system. And we are able to help people that have, neurological trauma, spinal cord injury, brain injury, or diseases or impairments from MS, things like that. We're able to help people recover from sports injuries and also improve and optimize their performance. And the reason that this technology and this approach is effective throughout that whole spectrum or continuum is because of this common thread of the nervous system and how the nervous system controls really the recovery process, the healing process. Recovery from injury is just like recovery from a workout. The same types of things need to happen. It controls performance, it controls our health, it controls our energy levels and cognitive function. I mean, there's so many things about our quality of life and our experience that are neurologically driven or controlled or influenced. And so, for me, that is a big point of emphasis, is starting there. In the nervous system, and we're looking really through that lens, and that's why it's front and center. That's why it's in the name of our business, and that's why it's the common recurring theme through everything that we talk about. And the reason that we use direct current stimulation is that it allows us to communicate with the nervous system in a much more powerful way. So, we'll talk, when we talk about the EMGs and some of the really awesome tests that Joe's doing there, we'll talk more about the tissue healing side. In the realm of neuromuscular reeducation and neuromuscular function, there's some really cool things, because with this current I think to kind of set the stage, just in terms of an overview here, one of the things that we did in the process of developing this device was to compare it a lot with the more traditional, more typical alternating current devices like TENS, interferential, Russian stim. And so we did some experiments where, I and other people would take a Russian stim device and put 50 milliamps of current on one arm, and we'd be locked up. There would be co-contraction, stiffness, muscles would be fighting against each other. And the limiting factor was that just what the muscles could handle. Whereas on the other arm, we'd use the same level of current with the unique pulse direct current of the newbie with its specialized waveform and some of the cool engineering features. We'd put that same 50 milliamps of current. It feels just as intense, just as much energy is being delivered, and yet we're able to move through it. And so of that same amount of energy, we can infer that more of it's going into the sensory and afferent side, less of it's in the motor output side. And so it allows us to create these input signals, almost like programming a computer, to create these input signals to really re-educate the neuromuscular system, the nervous system and brain in a much more direct and powerful and meaningful way. And what that translates to is that, the types of outcomes that you've seen there, that, other clinics that are using it have seen, where you can very quickly change someone's pain or range of motion or strength, not and it's in a period of time that's far too short for any meaningful tissue healing to happen, or anything like that. So it's obvious that it's a more of a functional change, and it's therefore a change in that underlying neurological patterning or programming. And being able to tap into that, beyond just being like a cool trick where someone can get their arm from here to here in one session, it actually legitimately, makes changes that improve function, that change the trajectory of the overall healing process, and that allow you to get outcomes that, I just find to be really inspiring and and so profound, that I just feel called every day to share this with as many people as possible.
Yes, yes, awesome. We've had the Neufit in our practice since 2018. And that's when we had gone to Texas, and we trained for 3 days with Garrett personally, and with his team out there. And we've had numerous successes, as Garrett has said. But more recently, since we have also introduced the diagnostic testing with EMG and NCS, we're starting to look at combining both of those technologies a little bit, and doing a little bit of kind of our own clinical research, from doing some pre-testing or some initial EMG studies, and then having the client or patient work with the Neufit technology as part of their rehabilitation protocol, and then some post EMG testing, so we can actually see what sort of changes are being made. And Joe here is going to share most recently, we've had a really amazing success story with a pretty rare case that we had here in the clinic, that we do have some of that data behind. As this process was happening, I didn't realize, it kind of happened organically. I didn't realize we were actually collecting the clinical data that we did collect. So I don't necessarily have a lot of the basics and the parameters on the Neufit specifically, other than this is what we used, it, this is where we placed the pads, and these are some of the activities we did. But this has definitely opened the door to us to being able to measure it much more objectively, and to see what's happening. So great absolutely. Blending of these technologies in the practice. So Joe's going to share with you, we're going to share the screen here for a second, and Joe's going to share with you, I think you want to bring up that journal article first that was talking about direct current and its effect on axonal regeneration, I believe.
There's one.
So we're going to try to share this here.
So here's the actual journal that I actually found, and direct relationship to the direct current and how it's being used with axon regeneration. So it's dated, as you can see, 2014. Peripheral nerve reconstruction after injury, review of clinical and experimental therapy. So I kind of perused through this whole thing, but I'm going to show you then, if I can go to it. This is the actual 2 little studies that were that were pretty related directly to direct current. So first one here we see says there have been overall limited reports of applying electrical fields or gradients across a repaired peripheral nerve. And I've seen that. There's very limited studies out there showing, because regular alternating current actually has, it limits it reduces the rate of regrowth for axon regeneration, which is normally about 1 millimeter per day. When you apply electrical direct AC current to it, it actually can hinder that process. So this is actually showing how they applied the direct current, and we can see here in animal studies, as little as 1 hour of direct nerve electrical stimulation immediately after repair of a transected femoral nerve in the rat promotes a dramatic increase in the kinetics of target muscle reinnervation, which is really cool. And then also they did one here in a pilot study, 1 hour of electrical, and again, this is direct current, was applied after the median nerve decompression at the wrist for 21 patients. So we have a little bit better of a sampling with carpal tunnel syndrome and thenar atrophy. The electrical stimulation group showed evidence of accelerated axonal regeneration and target reinnervation through motor unit number estimation and sensory and motor nerve conduction studies. So very cool that I was able to find these two directly linked to direct current. So.
Yeah, and Joe and I were also saying for any of the HADS partners or folks that were at the, was it the recent symposium?
Symposium, yep.
At the recent symposium, that one of the presenters also referenced a study on direct current.
I believe it was either John Lugo or Dr. Brooks too. He mentioned in there as far as treatment, and that's the first time I actually saw the direct current in that research and article. So
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, a definite. And I know that Garrett, he may want to just for a second here, Garrett. I know we were going to kind of get into this, but I know you guys have a ton of research currently going on in various fields with regards to the Neufit technology specifically. Do you want to take a few minutes to kind of touch on what you guys have going on at the headquarters as far as that goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several different avenues of research going on right now. The first couple have been in the orthopedic realm, looking at patients recovering from orthopedic surgeries and seeing the rate at which they're reaching their functional milestones with a younger athletic population after ACL reconstruction, older population after total knee replacement. And early returns are telling us that patients are meeting their milestones significantly faster, that they're, especially after total knee, they're needing a lot less pain, they're needing a lot fewer therapy sessions overall. It's very positive so far. We'll certainly share those as they come out. We're doing some work with the University of South Florida, their exercise physiology lab, and looking at some of what happens in response to a session related specifically to hypertrophy, and looking at how using the Newbie to stimulate muscles without any external load or other resistance can actually trigger the underlying biochemical processes related to hypertrophy. So some cool things there. We're working with a couple different, well, at least one in talks with here in Texas. Another one we have begun a study with a large healthcare network, Centura, in the Colorado area, to do a pilot study on MS patients and measuring how the Newbie can help them restore function. So there will be some actual nerve excitability tests objectively, and then there will also be tests like I forget what the distance is. Well, there's like a 6-minute walk or I can't remember, 2 or 6-minute walk test, and how long it takes to walk certain distances, and other measures of functional impairment and their ability to perform activities of daily living, things like that. And then we have a couple other studies going on that are in the early stages as well. But we just hired, actually, to be hot off the press for you, just agreed to terms with a PhD neuroscientist who's going to become our director of research starting officially December 1st. We have, with all these studies going on, we need someone who can really kind of oversee and manage everything. So she's wonderful. I'm excited to introduce her to you and talk more, set up a call where we can all talk about some of the work that you're doing there and see ways to collaborate on this, because I see that as being a very exciting avenue. So little bit of news there, and then in terms of direct current, just in some of the basic science, you know, there's if you have direct current, it's like an electrical gradient. So like if you think about, like, if a ball is here, it would be able to roll downhill. So there's this gradient, whereas alternating current, it's back and forth. And when you have that gradient, there is, you know, some of the basic science in human and animal models shows that that electric field can cause cells to line up and orient within that field. It acts like a signal to both orient cells and bring them to certain places and accelerate their function as well. So I think that's one of the things that we're tapping into in terms of the basic science. And these, you know, I think this is a very exciting avenue for further study in addition to some of those avenues. But that's the kind of overview on some of the main research that we have going on right now. And I'm really excited to get that out. You know, next year we should be able to publish a couple things here and, you know, start really getting some good information out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And congratulations. That's super
Yeah,
exciting
really cool.
on
Love that.
the director of research position coming on board.
Yes, thank you.
What we can do to help, you let us know. But
Awesome, thank you.
yeah, of course. So let's get into your guy, Bill.
Okay.
So we're just going to call him Bill.
Bill.
But we're going to share the screen and we're going to talk about Bill, who is our case study today.
All right, here we go. So Bill came to us back in well, we had this date of the actual service was EMG, and this was a good 2 weeks, I think, after we saw him for the initial. So he was back in the beginning of 2019. Bill came to us. He's a 77-year-old male, actually in phenomenal shape. I mean, very active. They love to hike, kayak, boat, you named it, they did it. And all of a sudden at the end of, well, it says here 12/8 of 18, he came down with a bout of shingles. And very shortly after that, it basically wiped him out. Basically couldn't hardly walk, took out his right lower extremity, basically. Strength went way down. Patient went from being very, very active to on a walker. And actually, I was the initial therapist that saw him for his initial evaluation at that time. And when he came in, he was with the walker and he still fell from the parking lot to coming into the clinic. He fell coming in. That's how debilitated he was from this. So we get him on a table. Luckily, nothing was injured at that point. What's that?
Talk about before coming to us, all we knew was that he had a bout of shingles and now he couldn't use his leg.
Yeah.
And what the neurologist had.
Yeah. So coming in, well, that's what I was going to get
okay,
to.
sorry.
So upon my evaluation, my subjective, but the patient, I don't even know if they can see you. So the patient told me that getting a background. So he was diagnosed with shingles, started to develop all these leg issues. Obviously, once they got the diagnosis, was then sent to a neurologist. Neurologist wanted at that point to order an MRI. And then basically was going to set him up shortly after to have nerve ablation therapy because he was having severe pain in that lower extremity as well. So basically this neurologist was wiping out any chance of this guy, having a decent prognosis at that point. Luckily, he had a good friend who is another physician, and the physician had actually came to us for treatments and actually was on the Neufit system. And he's like, at least go there first. I just, give these guys a chance before you get your nerves burned here and this and that. Go. That's where, coming in, to us. So I'm doing my evaluation and I'm showing everything, that whole right lower extremity. I mean, we're getting, knee extension. I'm getting like 2+ out of 5. I'm getting, all the signs of, of a radiculopathy. But I'm like, how is, again, in my mind processing, what's really going on from his shingles? I've not seen this. Had no adductor strength. I mean, he could not. He had I graded it like a 2 or 1 adductor. So it made sense of why he's stumbling around and falling. But then he's severe pain. His sensory was not terrible, but down and low. But then again, from basically on both sides. So he showed also some signs of maybe some neuropathy as well. So, but again, he's 77. So at that point, we did the evaluation and we started right away on the Neufit system, but we were doing, Neufit system based off of, as we kind of do it, we say, trust the process. We're going to map. Mapping is really trying to find where things are compensating. So obviously with this injury, he's compensating, we're finding points, and then we're putting him through some movements. And basically because he couldn't tolerate weight bearing, he's doing a lot of, stuff on the table or assisted with a gait belt. So we did that for a few weeks, and we were showing some change, but nothing that was really, glaring. So we're at that point like, well, let's do an EMG, because at that point it became about 6 weeks out from the actual onset. So that makes it appropriate for us to do the test. So we put him in, we did the testing, and here's actually the report here. So basically, if we look down before I give you on the impression side, I mean, we're looking at a lot of findings here that are kind of two different issues going on. So we have a lot of this no response here when we're doing the nerve conduction study, but based off of his age and, it's in both lower extremities. Now we're thinking, okay, this could be just related to like a general neuropathy. But then what really became glaring is when we got into the EMG part, and now we're seeing these, and it's outlined specifically in the L2 to L4 nerve roots there. And he's getting very, very significant issues here. So he's got in the rectus femoris here, we got reduced recruitment, we've got incomplete pattern, meaning there's very few actually axon fibers that are actually able to fire at all, meaning there's significant damage. We're getting the fibs and positive sharp waves, which are, we're supposed to be finding at this point being more of an acute issue. But basically showing this isn't good. So as we trace back up to the actual impression, and we're going to give, grade it as suggestive of a severe acute axonal pathology affecting the L2 to L4 root levels. So basically his outcome at this point, and I can relate, or I can show you another thing here. So if we go to our and this is a little bit smaller, but if you look at in this area right here, we're talking severe axon loss. Our prognosis is always going to be guarded to fair at best. So, giving him that based off this, again, an active 77-year-old who doesn't, he's been doing everything that he wants to do, travels the world, now saying like, uh-oh, am I going to be on a walker now or cane at best, what's my outcome? So, that's kind of what we're staring down. But then, now I bring to the therapist who happened to be Angie, hey, this is what we're finding. Let's, switch this up a little bit. Let's still treat the compensation points, but then let's also now let's put the pad placement of the Neufit system, let's place it on the L2 to L4 myotome and dermatome to see if we can kind of get some stimulation going of that axon, because I know again axons 1 millimeter per day. Maybe we can improve this process, reduce his pain, make him more functional quicker. So, and that's where we got to. So that's when Angie started to do that process. And what did you find?
Yeah, so we worked together with him 3 days a week, and his entire session, I mean, basically his hour with me was all on the Neufit or on the newbie machine, and we had his pad placement throughout the pattern as Joe recommended, and we basically took him through the same type of as physical therapists, the same type of open chain progression to closed chain exercise program as you would any other patient that was suffering from these sort of findings and functional limitations. Things started with being on the table open chain to me even assisting with the current, and then progressing to getting him up into weight bearing. We would walk. The cool thing is, we would walk with him with the walker, with the direct current machine on. We would do laps around we have it on a rolling cart. We would do laps around the building with it. And, we progressed from a walker and him just with the death grip, and me literally like the death grip on his gait belt. Like my biceps were sore when I was done. And, but I was like, because I have to give him the confidence. We got to walk. We have to do it. And, to a cane, to nothing, to I mean, to doing everything functional, but always with the Neufit throughout this myotome dermatome pattern. Um, and what I can, like the results I can give you now, he still continues to be a client at our facility, but he has far graduated from the rehab process, and he comes to see us just on a self-pay basis to continue to work out, I guess you would say, with Fit technology. So we continue to utilize the stimulation on various muscle groups now. Now it's whichever muscles or whatever activities that we're working on. But he works with my strength and conditioning coach on just functional movement strengthening exercises. And this gentleman is actually now, this has been a year and a half later, his functional ability has far superseded that of his premorbid state, which is just amazing to watch the vibrancy and his quality of life. Him and his wife come in, they train together. They're like two little peas in a pod. They do everything together. They boat, they kayak. He's riding a bike again, like an outside two-wheel pedal bike. They sent me a video of it the other week. He wasn't able to ride a two-wheel pedal bike before this whole shingles thing. Like his balance and core coordination was too far off to be able to do that. So it's been such a blessing to work with both of them, and so we're super grateful for all the things we've been able to do with them. But we did repeat not that long ago an EMG to find out, he's doing phenomenal. Let's see what his nerves are actually doing, and let's post test some of this stuff. So you want to share?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, fast forward to the date of service of 8/7 of 2020. We're going to scroll down. So basically the patient has been at this point been doing phenomenal, very last stages of therapy. We're trying to determine if he's a candidate now for our, what we call our athletic performance, part. And we're just going to retest and see what's going on. I was actually very excited to see, what we're going to find. And the very cool thing is if I scroll down here, and again, you EMGers out there, your ECS, we're going to basically show all of this being normal, which is, awesome. So all of our motors are normal. But then the cool thing is we're actually his surals before, which were abnormal, are now normal. The only thing that we're missing here is we still have the superficial peroneals are still, but being an active, he was a very on his feet. He ran it. He was a hiker. A lot of times, especially over the age of, definitely 77, we don't get a response here, but also we're showing no response here in the H reflex. But again, that for his age, that's again, pretty much we consider kind of normal. So at this stage of the game, we're almost like taking out that component of, did he have like that neuropathy going on?
Right.
So yeah, now we've kind of thrown that to the wind. But then the very cool thing is, and I didn't take out and weed through all these, but if we go down here, all of the ones I did test, which were the repeat from the previous, only 2 were showing here of anything, and we're showing just increased amplitude. So what that actually means is that basically he's got a normal phase through the motor units, very large, and that's just stating that, he had normal collateral sprouting, and that nerve is actually functioning like it's healed. It's like it was a wound before, and now it's healed, and it's firing. But we consider that normal when you've had nerve damage, and this is very appropriate. So basically, his findings, it's basically a normal study now, which is incredible. So we show here normal study, just large amplitude, normal phasic motor units, indicative of collateral sprouting. So I mean, it correlated directly with how he felt, but we were able to show it here objectively.
And in addition with being his therapist and being such a huge part of his recovery, this gentleman, he was a CEO of his own company in which he sold in Chicago years ago. And so this was a guy who was used to very much being in control, and very much it's very difficult for him to be in the situation that he was in. And I recognize that throughout his recovery process, it was very important to him from a mental standpoint into his confidence.
Yes.
in his recovery to see this data. This was, for us to say you're doing so much better, even for him to see, like, yeah, I'm walking all over the place. I walk 2 miles at the park with my wife now all the time. But to actually see this on paper and to actually do and repeat this study that Joe was able to provide him, the mental gain and the confidence that he was able to take away from it, I think is beyond, anything else we could have done with this study.
Yeah, he actually requested like a 5, and it turned into like a 15-20 minute meeting just to discuss, like, he wanted me to go over the whole first test and then compare it to this test and break down, like, well, what did this mean? What does this mean? Why do I still have a little bit of abnormality here? And when he walked out of there, he was just so tall and just being like, I can do whatever now. I don't have this issue now. So yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So super, super cool. And so I would like to, again, like Garrett, this is where I think we can kind of we can pause for questions, or we can kind of take a deep dive, like we had said earlier, Garrett, kind of in getting into a little bit more of that, like, physiology behind the neural healing process, and kind of getting a little bit deeper into that rabbit hole, if that sounds good to you. Or we can pause if anybody wants to chime in for a second, because I just get really excited talking about Bill. All right, we're good, Garrett.
That's awesome. Well done. I love hearing that story. It's fabulous. Really, really inspiring. I think that is on the leading edge of what's possible in physical therapy generally, with, and with our technology. I mean, it's just, it's so exciting because of what it opens up. And so for me, there's a couple different things that I think, different concepts that I think are related here, that it's worth really, talking about. One is that type of basic science about creating that electric field gradient of, direct current. And one of my favorite, I pulled it out here, one of my favorite books of all time is The Body Electric by Robert Becker. And so this is the one that, if anyone's familiar with it, this is the one where he famously speaks about some of these first studies on that figured out why a salamander limb regenerates. So the salamander is the most complex animal that can regenerate an entire limb. And what he found is that it's actually driven by the body's innate electricity, by the electric fields that the body sets up. And so there's a really interesting mechanism called the current of injury, or the charge of injury, that after a traumatic injury, after there's a cut, a wound, some sort of damage, both humans and salamanders set up an electric field around it, where it creates this significant change in electric field that starts to guide the early healing process. And then after, maybe about a week, I forget the exact number of days, between 1 and 2 weeks after that, the gradient that the human body sets up just kind of gradually goes back to zero as the scarring happens and the remaining process of parts of the healing process happen. And then at that same time, when it starts to kind of go back in the human, the salamander, their body, their electric field actually abruptly shifts in the opposite direction. And that's what triggers these incredible processes like cell de-differentiation, where a cell that may have already become a bone or a muscle or a connective tissue cell can de-differentiate, like go back to a stem cell, and then turn back into whatever else it needed. It could become a liver, it could become a blood, it could become whatever, and so that process, I'm not saying by any means that we're regenerating limbs yet, but just to kind of highlight the importance and underscore the relevance of the electric fields, that actually that's the main difference. That's the main thing, the main influence that guides that regeneration in a salamander, that differentiates the response, the healing process, from that of humans. And so, yeah.
Quick question. Sorry to jump in. I just have to ask, does that have, so that field that we create, does he speak at all about like phantom pain? I'm just curious if there's any connection between what you're discussing and what amputees experience in that regard. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff. And I can see how it pertains to what the McGilveries have been talking about.
That's such an interesting question, and that's another potential area. I mentioned we have a few other studies. So we've done a little bit of work just testing with a few patients at a hospital here in Austin. Um, our one of our DPTs went over and treated 4 phantom limb pain patients, and in the first session was able to reduce or eliminate their pain 4 out of 4 for all of them. And that's a really interesting thing. So that, I think, has to do with some of these other mechanisms around neuroplasticity, which is one of these other related topics that we'll talk about. So this particular part about the electric field is about the healing that happens, and so it would be relevant for um, healing. If a limb is completely or partially amputated and it has to heal at the end where it was cut off, this electric field would guide that healing process. But then even when it goes back down to zero and the healing process stops, that phantom limb pain can still linger. And I think that has mostly to do with the lack of input. There's still a part of the brain that monitors that limb that is no longer there. And since it's not getting any feedback, it perceives that as a threat. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know where this limb is. I don't know what I can do with it. I can't predict if it's going to run into something or what threats there are. And so that's a massive threat, not getting that input or that feedback. It's like, a deficit in proprioception, but amplified, many times over. And so there's, I think that the mechanism has to do with the perception of threat, which then of course triggers the brain to make that output signal that we experience as pain as a protective mechanism. And by working on the remaining parts of that limb and going through our process with the machine, we're able to provide that sensory input. This is my theory, my belief here, that we're able to provide that sensory input that kind of filled in the gaps of what that person was missing in that overall proprioceptive map of that limb, in a way that reduced the perception of threat and allowed them to have significantly less pain right away. And if there were a way to trigger, and this is just hypothetical, I mean, we haven't done anything in this realm yet, but if there were a way to trigger those same type of electrical patterns that the salamander has, potentially one day it is possible to regrow limbs in humans. I mean, that's like a science fiction, incredible type of thing, but understanding some of the basic science, although it certainly is challenging, it doesn't seem like impossible.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's an interesting thing there. So in terms of the healing and Bill and his nerve, it's very important that you apply. So this charge of injury is what actually guides the healing process, and it typically slows back down. Typically goes back to baseline, and the healing process slows down. After those few weeks, and so what I believe we're able to do is, by applying that direct current field, is kind of get back into that, like, immediately pre-injury, when the body's healing at its fastest rate. We recover at the fastest rate in the several hours right after a workout. If we're resting, we don't recover as well. We recover from an injury at the fastest rate, in the days or for a couple of weeks right after that injury, and then the recovery slows. So I think that we're able to kind of activate some of those healing mechanisms that are initially guided by that electric field, but that had diminished for Bill, and for anyone else in that situation, had diminished as they naturally do. So I think we're able to kind of reactivate some of that. Of course, that's a theory that I think it would be awesome to be able to prove, and I would love to be able to pick back up on some of the lines of research from that book and Dr. Becker. And in terms of direct current and the impact there, I think one of the other kind of adjacent concepts that's important to consider is that direct current, actually the Soviets had done some work with it, back in the 70s, and had seen benefits, but there was always this issue where to get high enough therapeutic levels of direct current into the body, there would always be skin burns and significant discomfort. And part of what that's a big part of why it fell out of favor, and why virtually all of the devices out there are now alternating current, is because we just couldn't get high enough levels of direct current into the body. And so one of the things that makes the newbie so unique is that it has a particular carrier frequency that allows that direct current to penetrate through without any skin discomfort. It actually feels very smooth and comfortable, at least from a skin perspective. Sometimes it can work on soft tissue in a way that can be uncomfortable, but that's productive. And so we're able to get those therapeutic levels of direct current into the body without the skin burning or without the pooling of ions that you would have with traditional direct current as well. And so you're able to get a lot of those benefits without any of the downsides. And I think that's a big part of it. And that's definitely an avenue for further research, is to figure out more and more about what is truly happening under the influence of direct current. What is it doing? There's a couple animal models, a couple studies that show, osteoblasts, fibroblasts, myoblasts, the cells that control regeneration, proliferation, healing of tissues. They work at a faster rate. They reorient along an electric field gradient, and they accelerate their function. And I think that the same thing is happening with the axons here that happened in Bill's case. So, there's this notion of the electric field, this notion of direct current, and then there's also the notion of neuroplasticity, which speaks to the ability of the nervous system to change and adapt and heal. And until the last couple decades, we thought that the brain was hardwired. We thought that when a neurological injury happened, there wasn't much that could be done at all. And in the last couple of decades, we've seen some incredible work in this realm of neuroplasticity. And there's another great book actually called The Brain That Changes Itself. Let me show that to you real quick here.
Interesting.
So this is one of my favorite entry points into neuroplasticity, The Brain That Changes Itself, by Dr. Norman Doidge, MD, psychiatrist, I believe. And he shares all these wonderful stories from different researchers who have shown the degree to which and the speed at which the brain and nervous system can change in response to environmental inputs. And so the nervous system does have a profound ability to heal, adapt, change, to reorganize. And so when we're talking about neuroplastic changes, we either need to heal, an area that damage has happened, or compensate for and find a new pathway to get the same function done. Here, obviously, Bill was able to heal. And in terms of healing, that's a process that, yes, that electric field gradient is relevant. And also generally for the nervous system, we know there's a couple prerequisites for any sort of neuroplastic changes, whether it's healing or reorganization, a couple different prerequisites that need to be present in order for that to happen. And one is stimulation. You need to have enough of the right amount of stimulation, and it has to be specific along the right pathways that you need. And then you need to have the prerequisite or the foundations physiologically to support the healing or regrowth, regeneration. So the body needs to have the nutrients, the raw materials in order to repair. It needs to literally have the proteins to make new axon material, the amino acids, the building blocks to make that. Needs to have fat in order to remyelinate those pathways, and and it has to have the energy to be able to take care of its basic survival needs, and then have enough left over to deal with those longer term growth and repair projects as well. So there's a lot that goes into it. And that's one of the things that I think is so cool about the newbie as well, is, I talked about that difference between, alternating current that will contract the muscles versus this type of pulse direct current, which will create more neurological input. And one of the things that, in terms of that amount of stimulation that it takes to drive neuroplastic changes, it's the equivalent of what it takes to train to be a champion professional athlete or a gold medalist at the Olympics. It takes like hours a day, not just once in a while, but every day for many months or years. You need hundreds of thousands of repetitions to drive true neuroplastic reorganization or healing. And part of what makes this so unique is that you're able to get so much input. You're able to communicate with the nervous system in such a direct and powerful way that we believe you're able to get the equivalent amount of work in these 3 sessions a week that Angie did with Bill, able to get the equivalent amount of work as if he were doing more traditional exercise for a couple hours a day every day. He's able to work more quickly and efficiently and safely towards that critical mass of the input that he needs to actually drive these changes, so that his body, his brain and nervous system get the point that, okay, this pathway is going to be challenged enough, and yes, it actually is worth investing the resources to upregulate and rebuild that, because gosh darn it, we're going to need it. It keeps getting challenged. It's important.
Yeah, very well said. That's awesome. Yeah. Let me pause for some kind of brain digesting on that realm. If anybody wants to jump in with any questions here or anything else sparked,
comments.
any other thoughts? If not, you know, any of you guys that have been kind of part, oh, I have to step out. Okay. Anybody else that has also been part of these coffee talks, and maybe who'll be listening to this later, you know, this is recorded as well. You know, we have been of more recent, really heavily focused on talking about areas in our practices where we can improve practice profitability, viability, especially around the proposed Medicare cuts that we see coming down the pipeline in 2021, shortly approaching us. And we've had a lot of great talks that Dr. K has led in different various mitigation strategies. And, you know, I think as a group, we've done a really nice job in trying to prepare ourselves for some of those things. But I would like to add in that, you know, first and foremost, we've used the Neufit in our practice as a means to provide our patients with better outcomes. Like hands down, that has been the number one goal of bringing that into our practice. And it has done that and even more. So in addition to the outcomes, kind of like what we were talking about with Bill, we've also been able to set ourselves apart and utilizing the Neufit as a market differentiator. You know, we are the only practice locally. I think the closest, there's one other one in Estero.
Yeah, but they're just using it as like personal training.
Yeah. And then the other closest one is like up in Tampa by us. But I mean, regardless, we've been able to utilize it as a market differentiating strategy, which of course has been helpful to bring in new clients, new patients that maybe we wouldn't have necessarily generated in our normal marketing means or pool. And then in addition to that, because the technology is a more of new age, more of this elite field, the sort of things that, as Garrett was mentioning, you know, there's still a ton of research. We're in the very early stages of developing a lot of that. You know, this isn't something that, you know, an insurance company is going to cover unless you want to, you know, call it neuromuscular re-ed and bill it under whatever that 97 whatever code is. But for us, what we've done is utilize the Neufit technology as an additional cash-based service within our facility. So our patients who are utilizing the technology and or are coming in on a self-pay basis, you know, that is a whole separate revenue stream that we have created in, again, utilization of elite technology that they're not going to find anyplace else. And that has definitely been a bucket that has helped practice growth. And we are definitely we're definitely moving forward into this next year, it's something that is also going to protect. That was the word, protect, I was looking for. It's also going to protect us throughout all of the things that are coming down with, not only Medicare, but what's the next one going to be? We all know that we all need to offset what we're doing from our third party payers, anytime that we can. So from that standpoint, all of, the private practice owners that are listening and watching, this has been, made a huge significance in our practice from that standpoint as well. So I just wanted to share that piece too. So, myself and Joe are available to talk with anybody who would want to, with regards to how we have utilized it as, as a cash-based service, and how we've set that up successfully, and how our thought process behind utilizing it as one of the mitigation strategies around insurance cuts and those sort of things. And I know Garrett is more than willing, between him and his director of rehabilitation, which is Mr. Jason Waz, on the Neufit team, who is a physical therapist, private practice owner out of Tampa, Florida. Both of them are a wealth of knowledge with regards to all of this as well. So, Garrett, you want to send any closing thoughts on everything we've talked about today?
Gosh, I have so many. I'm really excited to talk more with you about some of these possible avenues for research. I think this is really exciting, and then I appreciate that. I don't think I could have possibly said it any better or even as good. I appreciate your words about how the newbie has helped you differentiate your practice and helped you grow your business and scale in certain ways. And that's really what we want it to be. It's wonderful to be a good clinician and get good outcomes, but if you can't put food on the table, obviously, you can't sustain yourself and you can't serve others. And so, we've done our best to create an offering here that is, a home run, both on the clinical side and on the business side. And we love working with practices like Apex. It's a tremendous honor to work with both of you, Joe and Angie.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited to have this opportunity to share our message, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Garrett, if anybody has questions, concerns, or just wants to kind of drop you a note, where's the best way to reach you?
Great. Thank you for that. So if people want to just kind of see this in action, we're very active on the Instagram and Facebook platforms. It's Neufit RFP for Rehab Fitness Performance on both of those platforms. And then our website is www.neu.fit, no .com or anything, just new.fit. And there's a lot of information on there, including a link to contact our team. And yeah, if anyone is interested in exploring how this can fit into your practice, we would absolutely love to talk to you. Thank you.
Actually, I got one
For coffee. Yeah, go ahead.
One
please.
other thing too, I want to say, anybody that wants to contact us too about the marketability of this, it's like incredible. So I go out in the community, ever since we've had the Neufit system and then bringing on the MSKUS with the diagnostics, and those two are like game changing as far as getting people to see what you're able to bring to the table. You really differentiate yourself from anybody else. There's nobody else doing it. You get an instant buy-in. They're like, okay, whether I can show them that there's something wrong and that's why they're having this pain, or I can throw them on the Neufit and then create like a wow effect. They're like, how did you just do that? Is that magic? It's like, it really is game changing. It makes it almost not fair to go out in the community to bring patients in. So
it's fair. They get better. Yeah. It's fair.
So I'm saying it's not fair to the other people and other competitors.
Oh, it's fair.
So if anybody wants to talk about that and the techniques that we've been using and especially throughout this COVID and getting us numbers, even better than they were before. So I'll be happy to take any calls or messages on that too.
Yay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So next week then is, I'm passing my coffee mug for Will, right? Is that still true, James? Is next week coffee with Will? Yes. Okay. Awesome. Will, is always a pleasure and so entertaining to talk to you. So make sure everybody tunes in to talk with him next week. Thank you so much, Garrett.
Thanks for having me on too. It was a pleasure.
Oh, of course. Our pleasure, Garrett.
Always, Garrett.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye, guys.